Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the 18th episode of By the Drip. This podcast is about coffee, entrepreneurship, and the amazing people we meet through the story of coffee. I'm your host, David Crosby, founder and CEO of ROSSO COFFEE ROASTERS. Today's guest is none other than Boram Um, the newly crowned World Barista Champion. In case you didn't know, I had the honor of being one of Boram's coaches at the World Championship. Yes, I know what you're thinking. There's coaches in coffee competitions? Anyways, Cole joins me to interview Boram on the lead up to winning the championship, what training for competition looks like, and his really interesting answer on winning and becoming the world champion and what it feels like. And a quick side note, just in case you didn't know what the World Barista Championships are, it's a competition focused on promoting excellence in coffee, advancing the barista profession, and engaging with a worldwide audience with an annual championship. Each year, more than 50 champions compete and each prepare 4 espressos, 4 milk drinks, and 4 original signature drinks in a 15-minute performance set to music. Certified judges from around the world evaluate each performance on the taste of the beverages served, cleanliness, creativity, technical skills, and overall presentation. The top 15 highest scoring competitors from the first round, plus a wildcard winner, advance to the second round, the semifinals. All the baristas then present again, and the top 6 competitors in the semifinal round advance to the final round. The top 6 then present one more time, in which one winner is named the World Barista Champion. Hope this gives everyone some insights into becoming a World Barista Champion or just excelling in whatever you're interested in life. Please enjoy our interview with the newly crowned World Barista Champion, Boram Um. Boram Um, World Barista Champion. How does that sound, buddy?
I think it sounds pretty good, doesn't it? All the crazy adventure that we've been through for the last 3 years.
So if you reflect back on, it happened over a month ago, what does the title mean to you? How did we get there? How did you get there? What are your thoughts?
I guess we're just gonna go right into it. It feels pretty good. It feels pretty overwhelming as well. We've been like a month out of World Barista Championship right now, and when we're recording this, and I feel like I've been working already for 6 months after the Worlds. There's a crazy schedule of events. There's so much interest from people all over the world, as well as in the national level, about events and marketing things, seminars. So it is interesting to go through this experience of trying to organize my life for the next year while holding the title. And no, I guess no one really prepares you for that, right? We all think so hard about winning and accomplishing this amazing feat. And then I guess we just imagine that we're just going to pack our bags and go home. But not really, right? There's so much more stuff to it. And it's incredible to get to know this world as well.
What does the World Barista Championship title mean? What do you think that means to, the barista in the local coffee shop? And what does that mean to a consumer?
I think it means a lot of things, but if we summarize it, it's basically the professional who the industry looks up to and expects a lot of responsibility in terms of how we propagate and talk about specialty coffee, not only in our local communities, like our local market here in Brazil, in my case, but also in the global scale as well. It definitely, I think on the moment that we won this title together, I think I had at least 20 people come in to me and tell me, oh, this is going to change your life. And obviously I thought, yeah, of course it will. I'm going to be busy. There's going to be a lot of people wanting to talk to me, but it really is to another level where you feel the responsibility of representing the entire industry, not only representing yourself anymore or your company, your family or your country, but really there's a weight and a responsibility of really representing everyone in our industry. I can feel that through all the messages and all the people who are reaching out to me and all the opportunities that are coming out to us, I think it definitely is a different future from what I imagined originally. And I think it's really good. I think it's amazing, and I think we can do a lot of good and a lot of interesting change, not only on the global scale, but for me, it's quite important to bring this kind of change into Brazil as well, and how Brazil looks at specialty coffee industry and barista as professionals. And I think it will be a lot of positive change and a lot of evolution for our consumption here.
You go ahead, Cole.
I was going to say, let's start by talking about Brazil. Let's talk about what's happening in Brazil and what sort of potential you see as a repercussion of your title being the first Brazilian champion of barista in the 23 years that it's been around. What do you think that's really going to do to the local impact of consumption, production? Is the competition scene going to kind of blow up in a way that people all of a sudden believe that they can, or what do you feel is going to happen in Brazil?
I guess there's no real way of knowing what's going to truly happen, but I think some of the things that I do hope for, it's some of these that you just said. I think Brazil has been participating from since the third edition of Worlds, and participated in almost every single one ever since World Barista Championship started. The general feeling here in Brazil, it was that even before we began competing, we had some baristas that achieved good results, like Sylvia achieved 6th place in 2012, I think. But since then, Brazil has been not a focus point or the ideal country to win Barista Championships. And it definitely seemed like it was a hard thing to achieve. So I think it's good that we, as a company, as a small family business, we invested our time and resources into this competition, and we were able to achieve it this year. I think it brings a lot of hope. We got a lot of messages from professionals here saying, this is amazing. It feels good to be sort of acknowledged as a country that has good professionals, good coffee into the world. And I do hope that this will push more and more baristas to chase this dream of competing at world level and achieving good results in world competitions as well. I think it also opens up the minds of other professionals all over the world to be looking at Brazilian professionals in a different way, which is very good. But in general, it's really amazing to see how we were able to bring the interest of the general public into our market. Because up until now, specialty coffee was sort of like an elite, high-end product, sometimes perceived as overpriced or unattainable because of the price point. But being in the market that we are today, and with the crazy price fluctuations of even commercial coffees in general, most specialty coffee shops in Brazil are priced pretty much the same level as commercial coffees being sold at supermarkets today in Brazil. So I think being able to bring that interest of the general public into our industry will bring a lot of good results, not only for roasters here, for producers and everyone else. I get the feeling that it sort of changed the perception and brought this interest to the general public. And hopefully this will turn out into being something really positive for everyone here.
Now that you've won, has there been a moment or a person or someone reaching out that you can think back to and is, an honor or something they said in the last month that's really touched you or moved you?
There's a bunch of producers that came to speak to me, especially because we being able to achieve this title with a Brazilian coffee was something that pretty much everyone thought it would be impossible, especially because of the general perception about high-end Brazilian coffees. There's a few farms that have been into WBC as Brazilian producers, but I don't think anyone was able to achieve what we did. And it truly changes the perception about Brazilian coffee production. I was recently at the farm. We had a producer who came in to the farm because he was coincidentally driving the photographer who was going to take pictures with us. He commented to us saying, it's amazing to get the respect that we're getting now about our products and what we do. We don't he was telling me, wow, I don't see any other way how we could have achieved this without your work and what we have achieved at world level. This is a guy who's been investing so many years into fermentation and high quality beans, but always being pushed around in terms of pricing and sort of the stigma that Brazilian coffee has. So it sort of brought this spark into some of these producers in saying, oh, this is so good for us because it's going to bring so much more opportunity for all of us.
When you say stigma about Brazilian coffee, what does that actually mean? Because I would say lots of people love Brazilian coffee, but on a specialty level, what does that mean?
I think Brazil has always focused so much in quantity and production and cup cleanliness and not really competition level coffees or high end coffees that go into auctions and truly bring value into some small producers, that Brazil has this image of being coffees that will go into blends or will come into like mid-level specialty 84, 86 scoring cups. And I think it's been often overlooked in terms of its potential and what we can do in terms of competition level and the variety and diversity of coffees that Brazil has to offer, right? It's not only the classical chocolate, caramel, nutty flavors, but really bringing a new image and bringing a new type of profile that Brazil can offer and the diversity of those profiles. So I think that is a really interesting change that we can look into now.
Boram, when you're talking about Brazilian coffee and the potential, I remember a conversation we had, I think, toward the end of our time in Greece. And Jesse asked you a question about terroir in the context of Panama and how Panama has kind of struck gold in the sense of geisha in the highlands there and in Chiriquí and sort of the expressions that they can get out of their coffees. And she asked you if you believe you can find something similar in Brazil and hit coffees to a similar quality tier, to similar complexities, similar expressions. And I'm wondering if you can maybe re-answer that question for the people listening, because I think it was a fascinating response that you had.
So in general, I think Brazil has a few varietals that work really well. And we know that it has adapted so well into Brazil since they've been producing some of these varietals for so many years. Like, for example, I can say that I know that, like, for example, the pink Bourbon that we use or the yellow Bourbon even is probably one of the best coffees that we can produce in our own terroir, in our own farm. But I think there's obviously a few challenges into Brazil that make it hard for us to be like, oh, Panama geisha. I think Brazil, we can definitely think about in the fact that everyone knows yellow Bourbon from Brazil, for example. But I don't think we as producers have invested enough yet or researched enough into how to elevate that to the full potential. I think we still rely on some techniques that hasn't really proven its full potential yet. And then there's also the fact that Brazil is very large and very diverse. Our yellow Bourbon works really well in many different farms, but definitely some regions it won't work because terroir is way too different, climate's way too different, and processing techniques will be way too different as well. But I do think there's the full potential of bringing that back into the world as well as being the high quality Brazilian coffee. It's just that how do you excite people about yellow Bourbon, right? I think that is a big challenge. I still think that there is a lot more potential finding multiple varietals that can be amazing for our country here.
Zooming in specifically to your production at Fazenda you've got the two different sites. How many different varietals are you guys playing with to sort of test and experiment on your terroir?
I think last time I counted, we're about 46 different varietals testing on both farms. We've been succeeding a lot with some of the new exotic varietals that we've been bringing from partner producers in different countries, like the pink Bourbon, the whoosh whoosh, playing with a little bit of geisha as well. But I think from all these years that we've been producing coffee still, our yellow Bourbons have been hitting all of these varietals out of the park. Like yesterday, we had our first cupping table for this year's varietals and the first few samples that are coming out of our Minas farm. And it's incredible how yellow Bourbon always stands out so amazingly, which is a proof of how consistent and how well adapted this varietal is in our farm. And it's bringing so much interest all over the world. And I think we were able to elevate it through processing and different techniques that we've been applying every year. And we have applied this year for our pink bourbons as well. So I think it's a climb up that it's exciting in terms of quality for the future here.
And then you used pink bourbon in the competition. Do you maybe want to speak to that for a hot second about the pink bourbon that you used and how that lot was processed and why that coffee specifically?
Yeah, of course. So we've been playing with these different varietals, like I said, and we understand that genetics is probably a big step towards quality. And obviously knowing pink bourbon always performs so well in Colombia and different countries, we decided to test it out 3-4 years ago. And we had our first initial results in the start of 2022 with pink bourbon, and we really enjoyed what we had. The few bags that we produced sold out very quickly, and we knew there was a lot of potential. Knowing these coffees have, when they're processed naturally, very simple Brazilian natural process, and knowing that these coffees have so much potential being processed in a simple manner, I knew that we could bring a little bit more out of these coffees for the competition level. So obviously talking a little bit about the competition planning as well, it's always the dream of bringing coffee that we produce into the world stage. I've never competed with a coffee from my farm in the world stage, only at the national level. And we had this amazing experience visiting Panama with you guys, with Cole and the Forward team, and understanding how people process their coffees and learning new skills that truly elevate coffee, the genetic varietal quality. I knew that we had to test all these things into our coffees as well. And everything sounded very logical in terms of trying and testing for these varietals. So that's why for the pink bourbon and for the yellow bourbon, before our national even, we were already testing dark room drying techniques. And the first amazing result we had was with our yellow bourbon right before our national competition. And in the national competition level, I was already using also Kai Jensen's geisha, but this time was a honey geisha. The coffee was incredible. And although that coffee specifically didn't have the same darkroom techniques, we knew we were onto something that could truly improve our coffee quality. So when we first tasted that yellow bourbon that we did, our darkroom drying, it was a pulp natural, which is sort of similar to Jansen's honey process, but dried in a dark room with consistent temperature and consistent humidity. And we were completely shocked with the result that it gave out. We had most of our team saying that it was so similar to what you taste in African origins, like Ethiopia or Kenya even, with so much floral notes, citric notes, and such a clean taste that was just nothing like we ever tasted in our farms. So we knew that this could be a potential technique that really brings out sort of the original taste of that varietal, because yellow bourbon obviously has origins that date back to Ethiopia, right? To typical varietals. So once we got that amazing result with the yellow bourbon, we used that in our competition for nationals. And we had really, obviously, we won the national competition. We brought an amazing result to that coffee and to our competition levels. And we knew that this would be the key for us to use into World Championship as well. So the pink bourbon went through the same processing. There was obviously a big concern about timing because the pink bourbon was harvested much later. We're like at the start of harvest process in Brazil, and the coffee was extremely fresh. But I'm so glad that everything worked out fine and the coffee presented itself really well, and we were able to achieve this good title for all of us. Training like raw new people who had never worked with coffee into the barista level. And we had a barista who was very eager to learn, and she was very interested into the market. And when we presented to her with the options like, hey, like, do you want to try this competition thing? It happens every year in Brazil. And if you win the Brazilian level, you get to go to the Worlds and really meet all these amazing people in the industry. Like I already traveled most of these events because I was working with the export side of our coffees, but I think it would be a really nice opportunity for you to learn and see how the specialty world works outside of Brazil. And back then, Brazil was very initial levels of specialty coffee as well. So we had our barista start competing. And I remember, I think that year she competed first for nationals in brewers. And like we knew absolutely nothing about competition. Although Brewers Cup, it's a lot simpler and there's different levels of complexity into it. Like we never even thought about putting our baristas firsthand into barista competition. So we pushed them into brewers first. And we're like, okay, yeah, we know we have to select a really good coffee, and we selected a really nice Brazilian coffee, specifically from Espírito Santo. This is way before we produced coffee in Espírito Santo. But we had a really nice cup of coffee from Espírito Santo that was very citric, lime-like, panela-like. And we're like, oh, this will be probably a really good coffee for you to compete with, obviously not knowing anything about competition. And then this barista, she sort of like built a speech around like hospitality, because her family was from, her grandfather was from Japan, and she also had like this Asian kind of culture into her life. So she sort of like did the tea ceremony type presentation with the coffee that she served. And she got into third place, which was really amazing for someone with less than 6 months of barista experience competing at the national level, which is really nice. And it was a really interesting experience. We were really happy with that. And obviously you start becoming more anxious and more directed toward like someday winning these competitions and things like that. So we had our baristas compete since 2017, and they went on to compete. Like our competition baristas grew. Like obviously in the market, people started seeing our company as a coffee company that invests in their professionals to compete. So we had a lot of people come into our team, and people were excited about competition, and we were obviously investing in them and getting all that amazing knowledge, but also trying to achieve good results because it was good for business and it was good for our general knowledge. I think the biggest we came into, it was around 2018. We had, I think, 4 baristas compete at the same time, 2 at barista level and 2 at brewers. And it started to become frustrating because we were only achieving third spot every time. So for brewers, we achieved third spot. And for barista competitions, our baristas would DQ every year. But DQing for like the most stupid reasons you can even. Obviously, one of them was like overtime, and the other one would be like some very random thing that obviously like the baristas didn't really read into rules and regulation, and the company was growing very quickly. So me and my brother were also really busy with expansion and other things. So in some part, it was our fault as well that we weren't able to take a lot of our time into understanding better rules and things like that. But also, we felt like a lot of the baristas were not investing much of their time. It's really hard to motivate people, and I think you guys know that more than anyone else with all the years of experience in competitions that you guys have. So in 2019, Marcia Yoko came into our team, and she is a seasoned Brazilian coach. She has coached a few of the national champions. And obviously with the drive to achieve better results, we brought her in because we wanted to improve that competition level. And we understood that there was so much more into competitions that all the simple things that we were doing, right? It's not only about selecting a decent coffee. You have to select an exceptional coffee. You have to train. You have to build structure around training and truly think about this more professionally than we were thinking about it. So I think that opened my eyes into a lot of different things and made me realize maybe the quickest way for me to learn and gain experience around this thing is for me to do it myself, at least once. That was my thought in 2019. Like, let me do it once and understand what I'm putting my baristas through so that I can better guide them, right? The first sort of like hands-on experience I had was going into Boston, and I volunteered at the Barista Championship, and that was really amazing to do. Like, that was really an amazing experience. I spent almost all days, either like timekeeping for the national champions, or I think it was timekeeping or cleaning the machines. So it was really interesting because I got to see how some of the competitors will come in and set up their tables, and those moments right before they started their presentations, right? Like seeing them concentrate and all of their rituals involving competition. And it was very, very interesting seeing that. And I obviously at that stage, I realized how this was much more than what I was imagining, right? And it was at that competition that I met Sakamoto and Yoshi Iwase, because they were they were coaching the Japanese champion at that time. So it was really interesting watching how the Asian teams, they build like these crazy teams. They have so many people around them. And I think that started sort of building the essence of what we understand how to tackle competitions. And then I went back home in 2019, and we had our national competitions to be held in November of that year. So that's when I started prepping for my first national competition. And for my first national competition, I knew that I had to approach competition in a different way, knowing that my family produces coffee and I'm also a producer. I knew I had to bring like coffee producing knowledge into our presentation. So for that year, I competed with a Mundo Novo that we fermented anaerobically for the first time. Like, we weren't doing any fermentations before then. Can you imagine? We're just doing like regular naturals and pulp naturals. And obviously, like, watching so many competitors, I visited Colombia for the first time that year as well. And I did sort of a course on coffee fermentation with a few Colombian producers. So I was like, oh, this is it. Like, this is what I'm going to bring into our national level. Let's do these crazy fermentations. I remember spent like 2 months almost at the farm doing like crazy experiments. And I was like, so many days, I was like, what am I doing? I have no idea how this is going to work. I remember we set up at least 6 to 7 different experiments. And I was like getting the cherries just as they were picked by our farm team and just submitting them into fermentation processes and like trying to track everything. It was a really amazing experience, hands-on in the farm, and building like fermentation protocols for the first time, which was very interesting. And then I remember that year we did a double ferment of a Mundo Novo that was basically putting the first initial cherries that we picked into a tank, sealing that for 24 hours. And then after 24 hours, we pick fresh new cherries and we put on top of those and then seal that back in and do 48 more hours. A little bit of a higher temperature fermentation, like 36 degrees, but it came out really interesting, like red fruits, strawberry. I just remember all like the profiles because we worked so hard on that. I remember I got like an infection in my hand because I had a cut from processing the coffees. It was pretty intense.
You're such a warrior. You made it through though.
It was very funny. It was very funny actually. But I knew that it was a coffee that I could use in the competition. So I used that Mundo Novo, and everyone was like, what are you doing? You're competing with a Mundo Novo. Are you insane? And there were people competing with like Ethiopia, Geisha Village at that time in Brazilian nationals. And I remember just building a really nice presentation and practicing so hard and still making so many mistakes. And it was sort of like the first process.
Before you go on, looking back at how you approach competition, like training, tasting the coffee, is it that much different from this year?
I think the base and the structure is very similar. So the fortunate thing we had is with the Japanese team, they have a really good setup and structure for training. So like they know exactly how to build a training schedule, and they are the ones who start already talking about like competition practice has to be like high performance athlete kind of training. You have to do it every single day until you're not making any mistakes, until you have zero shred of doubt in terms of your routine. And I remember like being so impressed about how Iwase trained his routine like 400 times before he competed at the world level in 2016. and got into second place. So I remember all those amazing datas that they would provide and being like, we never thought about roasted coffee and their aging and the perfect time about using these coffees for competition. They were like, yeah, you have to build a roast schedule. If you're going to compete in nationals, you have 2 levels. You have to have a roast for your first day. You have to have a roast for your finals round, and you have to structure that. And I think in essence, the training structure and the preparation structure in general, it's similar to what we do every year and what we did for Greece. Obviously, the level of complexity just changed considerably in terms of what we prepared. And yeah, I remember on the first, we were starting like first building the speech and then memorizing all the speech and trying to pair all the movements into the speech, getting the drinks properly ready. And then once everything is done, like just push through routines as many times as we could.
How many times do you think you actually did your routine before that final one?
The national level?
No, this year, just running it up this year.
Oh, this year. We haven't really counted. I'm pretty sure we would have lost count even if we tried counting it. But I would say at least 400 times as well.
How many times have you done it after your finals? Have you done it just a few more times to see if you still got it?
No way. I can't remember my speech anymore. No way. No more, please.
So you go on to win that nationals?
Yeah. So it was pretty crazy because I won that nationals, and that year's first world competition was scheduled for Melbourne in April, from what I remember. And that's when the pandemic hit. So it was a lot of waiting for my first world competition. In a sense, it was good because I was sort of on an endless preparation period. I remember that period while we're still waiting on to the announcement of when the World Championship was happening. I was still consistently trying to train every day, think about competition, study this, study that, look for coffees here. So it was sort of like I had sort of almost 2 years of preparation before my first world appearance. Although I know my skill level was still not very experienced, but I just remember being a little bit more calmer and a little bit more collected for my first world competition because I've been waiting for so long for it to happen. So I remember practicing here and there every day. I had the full setup here in my office for the Worlds with the machine and the grinders. So it's really nice to be able to sort of take it slow and think about, obviously, speech and ideas changed consistently because of everything that we were going through as a coffee community and as humanity, I guess. But it was nice to have that much time to process everything before the first World's appearance. And I just remember on both of those times, the things that really stayed in my head were in the first nationals, it was okay, I practiced so much, but I don't know what's going to happen at that stage, right? Having that fear of making a crazy mistake and all that, those insecurities were there so strongly. And I remember those insecurities coming in so clearly at that time and really not knowing how I would behave at stage because it's something that I've never done. And at the world stage, it was the same thing. I was okay, this is my first world stage. What if this happens? What if that happens? But I've trained, I've came prepared, but obviously not with enough experience and having that thrill of, okay, let's not just destroy this opportunity that I have. So I remember those two feelings clearly from my first appearances in nationals and worlds.
So you went 3 for 3, right? You competed in 3 seasons, even though it took 4 years because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
You competed in 3 seasons. You won all 3 of your nationals.
Yeah.
You presented, I think, wonderfully at Worlds in each of those. Have you ever considered or reflected back on what would have happened if you didn't win your first nationals? Do you think you would have got up and tried it again the next year? Or have you ever sort of thought through that at all?
It's a very interesting question because I sort of indirectly went through that on my first nationals. I don't know if you guys remember, but when I competed my first nationals, there's another competitor who sort of broke some of the rules of competition, but he was announced as the winner and I was announced as second place. And I remember distinctly that preparing into the first nationals, we didn't go in with the expectation of winning. We knew that it was part of the experience. And it was sort of like a trial for me in the sense where it's either I have a good learning experience and then afterwards I can just push one of my baristas to compete, or I'm going to enjoy this and I'm going to keep doing it. And since I didn't really know what the outcome would be, and then coming into second place on the announcements, I knew I wanted to come back. I sort of went through the process, and then a week later, we got announced as number one, and that we would go represent Brazil at Worlds. So it was an interesting experience because the thought process was like, I have two options here, and obviously I decided to keep going.
So I do remember, because I was in Brazil when you competed for the first time, and I saw you present your anaerobically fermented Mundo Novo, and I saw you get announced as second, and I saw your two routines in primary and final round. So I was curious what would have happened. I don't think I've ever asked you that before, if you came second and stayed second in that moment beyond the announcement. But obviously that got turned and you had the opportunity to go to Worlds. But I think fascinating start to the journey, right?
Yeah, it's a little bit crazy, but I do distinctly remember that when I got announced second, I was getting help from Marcia and like the Japanese team and Danila. I remember like distinctively saying like, hey guys, I'm going to start prepping and we're going to come back next year. So yeah.
Which I think that's the competitor's attitude. I think it's, for people listening, it's not always about winning. I think the really powerful thing that you said earlier, you kind of missed the journey. Right? You felt hollow in a sense for a few days after the win. And it's really fascinating. I think as humans, we follow this path, we set goals, we want to achieve those goals. But then a lot of the time we don't really take the time to appreciate the actual day-to-day and the journey and the hard work and the collaboration, the teamwork, the commitment, the enrollment that you get from all these different people. And it's not always necessarily about winning. It's about the learning and the drive.
Yeah, definitely agree. I think we get addicted to the thrill, I guess, as well. But the journey, it's incredible. I think it's probably one of the most valuable journeys someone can have in our industry, because it's not only a journey about learning about coffee and meeting amazing people, but for me, I felt like it was a journey about getting to know myself as a person as well, and understanding what I'm okay with, what I'm good with, what I suck at and I'm really bad at, and how that creates so many amazing connections as well, right? And I feel like I've matured a lot through this journey, not only as a professional, but as a person as well. So I think that is definitely the most valuable thing to take away from this, and not the title.
I think the exciting thing too is the next journey starts now. Who knows what the goal or the finish line necessarily is for that. I think that's for you to determine. But, one journey has come to a close. One chapter in the book of Boram has come to a close, and the next chapter kind of begins. And now with the experience, with the new communities that you've connected with all the, coffee people around the world that are supporting you, you get to kind of, in a sense, choose what happens next and where that finish line or that goal post kind of shifts to, which I think is what you're going through right now in the month since WBC, obviously, but super fascinating, super exciting to kind of dive into that maybe as a segment, unless Dave, you've got some other follow-up questions for Mr. Boram.
Well, I want to hear about last year.
Oh yeah.
Let's talk about last year.
Where did you place when you went to Worlds the first time?
So on the first time, I had the luck of getting into the
wildcard slot. He's hesitant to say he was the wild card.
You were the
No,
wild
I'm not
card.
hesitant.
Wow.
I was trying to remember the word. Yeah, I was lucky enough to be in the best team of that competition. I remember it's the year that Diego from Colombia won. And then I remember my team was like Diego and I think a couple other finalists or semifinalists. I got pulled into semifinals because I was the wild card. It was quite the interesting moment because when the announcements happened, I remember like the MC, he looked straight into me and I was like, okay, what's going on? And then he's like, yeah, the first wild card is Brazil. And it was really neat and it was really nice to be able to present a second time our routine. And I think there's an immense amount of value of the experience of going into a semifinals as the wild card because you start understanding how every round is different. And obviously, in the first round, it's always a lot more tense. There's so many things going on. Everyone is so stressed out. There's so many people in the backstage. And then in the semifinals, it's a little bit more pleasant. It's a better experience for sure. You can relax a little bit more and have better time prepping for the competition and concentrate even better. So I think that was really interesting and it was really a good experience. And then it was sort of like the first taste of world competitions for me. And the energy is just different at the world level. Everyone is so nice. You get to meet so many incredible competitors. And you also get to see how far you are still from going into a finals, right? At least for me, it was like, oh wow, like I'm still so far away. And it's good in the sense that you get a clearer image of the objective. I think for me, it was like, okay, like I know now some of the things that I need to do. And I know that I have to do this and this and this and that. And I think that experience it's really hard to teach or coach, honestly.
So if you were to pass on some advice to maybe a barista competitor that came, I don't know, 25th or 16th or 12th, like what did you reformulate after your first year at Worlds that helped you break through, I guess, somewhat on the second year?
Yeah, I guess the mental game is probably something that people need to really invest on. And for me, it's from that first experience, it was very clear that there are people who blame everything else and there are people who look inside and try to improve. And for me, that was a very sort of shocking thing to go through in this in a positive way. Like after like stumbling into semifinals and then talking to some people who didn't go to semifinals, and there was a clear difference in between people who are looking to succeed and they had their mental game right, and then comparing to people who are like, oh yeah, this doesn't work out, like that person didn't help me and things like that. And you can see that it's the base of success in any kind of thing, not only in competitions, I guess. So for me, it was really nice to see how far away I was from a lot of the top level competitors, but also to understand all the mistakes that I did, like especially in terms of our biggest topic, which is like how to build a team and how to select coffees and how to train. I mean, I trained hard, but I wasn't training the right things for that year. So it was a lot of learning from mistakes and learning from that overall experience. And I think having that clear head that there's always room for improvement, and that in the end, if something doesn't succeed, it's not anyone's fault but your own, and understanding that you're the only person that can change that was an eye-opening experience for me.
So let's fast forward. You've won nationals in 2022 and you're going to Worlds in Australia. What are some of the changes you made going to Worlds that year? And then maybe talk us through the results, and then we can do the lead up to Worlds in Athens this year.
So for 2022, for obviously from the previous experience that I had in the first WBC, is I was first very clear idea in my head that like I should pick a topic that I'm super passionate and I'm super interested in talking about. Not really thinking about anything else, but like something that I think it's super interesting. And I remember watching Cole's national presentation and him talking about decaf coffee, and also seeing this current trends in the market where more and more people are coming in with low caffeine varietals. I just wanted to understand that. And I thought it was fascinating how that could potentially change the way we consume coffee and the way it could change the market. So we dove deep into low caffeine varietals. We analyzed Hermosas, Lorinas. We talked to like institutes like Federal Institute of Espírito Santo in Brazil and understanding what caffeine does with our sensory experience. And I thought that was really fascinating. So I really pushed hard into that. And another learning lesson was maybe not do a national competition and then switch everything completely into a new thing for Worlds. Like try to build maybe sort of a more concise version for nationals and then build upon that for Worlds. So for nationals, we already went in with the topic of low caffeine content coffees. We used the Lorena, and I think that gave me a lot of the experience I needed for Worlds that year as well. So like understanding better the coffee that I'm using. Lorena is such a challenging varietal to work with, to roast, to extract. So I think I was able to already apply some of the interesting learning lessons that I had from my first WBC appearance. And we went with that same sort of speech structure and idea structure into Worlds. Obviously, we began working more closely together with you and Cole because I saw an interesting fit that we had in the first year in Milan. Although we met before in 2019 and in 2018 at our shops, but in the competition level, we worked really closely starting on the Milan Championship where you were helping calibrate. Obviously, I was using coffee that forward sourced in all these years as well. So it was really, I felt that like we had a really good interaction in the first Milan year. That's why when I sat down and talked to the team in Brazil, we were like, hey, let's try to restructure the team as well and build upon the good experiences that we had in Milan. So that's why we reached out to you guys and we're like, hey, we're really invested into this competition thing. Will you help us? And happily, you guys said yes and helped us out for our first year in Melbourne. And it was really good because I went through the right process of like winning nationals and having a good amount of time to go into Worlds. I remember, I think it was maybe 4 months before I went to Worlds or something, 5 months. So I had time to prepare. I had time to source coffee. We had time to build training sessions together. It was the first time I've decided to get out of the city and of Brazil and train in a different location. So it was the first time I went all the way out into Calgary with you guys and to train for a month. It was really an amazing experience because being fully invested into something like competition for a month definitely makes, I think it will definitely make any competitor evolve immensely very quickly. And I remember just building out the speech and the training session with you guys. I do remember the quite challenging part was that because I did not have enough experience, my idea of training would be like, let's build out the speech 100% and then just like punch through that training multiple times. So with you guys, it was different. It was the first time where we build the sort of the structure, but we keep adding into things and like polishing everything until we make it like truly perfect. The challenge of doing that for me is what, in my opinion, made me evolve so much quicker and being okay with, I remember like on that semifinals, we were making changes into the speech the night before we went into the semifinals. And it was a really nice experience learning that from myself too, that like, oh, I can do this. Like, I didn't know I could, but I can make these changes and I can improve and continuously improve what we do. And I think it's all about that. So it was really nice. And then we did not make into finals that year. We came into 7th place. We were very close. It was sort of disappointing, but it was also a build upon the first WBC sort of learning lessons. Like, we understand that we had issues with this varietal that we're using. We had some comments that were not so helpful in terms of like, in the end, I knew that, hey, maybe like, hey, I definitely didn't deserve to be in that final because of this and this and this. And I remember in the first week after that WBC, I I had a clear idea of the things that I needed to improve on. And it was like, I know I had to improve on my latte art. I know I have to improve my presentation skills. I know I have to like give more time for judges to evaluate their drinks. Like I knew every single point that I needed to improve, even though we didn't hear those points in a feedback session. And that year was really the year that I really thought to myself if I should go back or not immediately after, especially because it was already 3 years training and prepping for competitions, allocating a lot of resources into this, time into this. And I just felt really tired. I was really tired. And then I was inspired by Cole because Cole and you, Dave, have been in this for over a decade. I was like, I can't be tired. I can't be tired. These guys,
buddy.
These guys have been here for a decade. And obviously it is because it was for the first time that I felt like I knew the things. If I improved these things, I could get into a final. And that was the objective. And I was like, you know what? We're so close. Let's just give it one more shot, right? And then here we are.
I remember, right after we did the debrief with the judges and we were all kind of gutted. And you kind of go through this range of emotions where you found out you're 7th and the top 6 are the finalists. And, we knew we were so close and you're kind of pissed off, but also proud, but also unsure about the competition. And we had a little chat and I remember saying like, this is the moment where we have to like double down and we have to go again. Like this proves that we are so close, regardless of, what happened. It's like, this is the moment where we got to use this anytime for next year when we're tired and want to quit and stop. It's like, we got to think of this moment to keep going, to keep pushing. I could see in your eyes, like part of you was like, it's so long and it's been brutal. But then right afterwards, you were revved up and like not ready to go right away, but you knew you were back in and just able to use that as not a negative thing, a thing to bring you down, but as a actual positive to like drive you forward.
I think it's one of those things too, like we reflect back on it. If you had made finals in 2022, you probably wouldn't be here in the role you're in now with the world champion title. You would have done whatever you did in finals, ranked out wherever you did. Maybe you would have won in that moment. But, if you had made finals, I'm quite sure through our conversations then that you would have been content and you would have probably retired after that moment. So I think, again, in a way, sounds cheesy, but everything kind of happens for a reason. And we're here today because of what happened then. And it was challenging at that time to hear that feedback and to hear some of that debrief. But I think to all the competitors listening, like take from those debriefs everything you can, grow from that as a person and as a professional, and use it as motivation to either run it back or to improve your day-to-day experience wherever you might be in your community, and use this platform as a platform for growth.
That is true. Although we were frustrated, I think deep down, I remember clearly deep down, I knew that I didn't deserve to be in those finals. I know I wasn't personally happy with how everything was executed as well. There was definitely doubt in my head about how the coffees were tasting and things like that. So it's definitely mind-bending in a lot of senses and how your mental game works for these competitions. But deep down, I knew that, maybe we definitely didn't deserve to be at the finals. And I think, that definitely brought me the drive to come back. And I completely agree. Like if I went to finals and I placed 6th that year, I potentially would have not come back.
No, we would have run it back. We were running it back unless you won, buddy. We're going to the bitter end here.
Okay. Good thing we didn't. We went to the good end.
Yes. Okay, so let's talk this year.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of interesting to timestamp things before you go into it. So just for reference, June 2022 is when your nationals was for that year. September 2022 was Worlds. You then had nationals 2023 in early March, and then you're in a second Worlds in June. So really we're one calendar year, 2 nationals and 2 World Championships.
Oh yeah. I guess I didn't realize that. It's actually 12 months and then 2 nationals and 2 worlds, huh?
And in those 12 months, the 3 of us plus many other people spent a lot of time together. I think the 3 of us probably have...
We probably have 4 months together.
No, man, more than that. Probably 200, close to 200 days together.
Yeah, I would say 2/3 for sure. Oh, wow. How do you guys even take up with me?
I'm surprised we're still talking.
Yeah. I'm not.
Thank goodness he won. Otherwise, we might not be.
I think it's actually a good testament of how we get along and how sort of everything worked out in our favor in that sense. I remember going into this nationals and just not, I don't even know if I told you guys this, but like, I just remember going into these nationals this year in March and just not feeling passionate about anything and not really excited about what I was doing. And I remember I just didn't know what I was going to talk about in my nationals. And I was like, oh, okay, like I made through nationals. And I'm like, what am I going to do for Worlds? I have no idea. I haven't researched anything interesting. I've been like playing with these new techniques of drying that we learned from Panama. And I remember like going into Panama after nationals with Cole and some other people and just not finding the right inspiration yet for doing anything. So it's definitely interesting how the timeline played out because we had very little time for this World's preparation. And I remember having like after winning the nationals and having the feedback from some judges telling me like judges who judged me in the previous year and telling me like, I don't know what happened to you this year, but like you just didn't seem like you're feeling it. And we didn't feel the enjoyment. Obviously, like your technique was really good. Your coffee was amazing. And that's probably what made you win. But we didn't really feel like you were excited to be there. And I really sort of took that into heart as well. And I realized like I was starting to think like, oh no, like was this a mistake coming back and thinking about the little time that we had to prepare. Like I've never had 2 months only to prepare for Worlds. So I was definitely overwhelmed in that sense. I was like, what am I going to do? And then I remember talking to you guys. We're like, okay, let's do the same thing. We had really good results of practicing for a month in Calgary. Let's book those tickets and get that going. And then I was like, oh my God, I need to go to Calgary. I don't have a speech yet. So I'm going to write something up here and send to these guys for them to approve. And then just figure it out from there. I remember clearly having the thought of right before getting into Calgary, where I was sitting with Marcia and discussing, and I was telling her like, hey, I'm not happy about this speech. I'm not happy about what we want to talk about Worlds. And then I just remember thinking like, hey, I think since this one will be my last one for sure in my head, like I knew that not depending on the outcome, like whatever happens with the outcome with this year, like I was probably going to stop. I was like, why don't I just talk about the whole experience that I've been having for these 3 years? And the whole experience has been around the journey and about the people around us and the team that we've built to do this. So like I told Marcia straight up, I was like, I'm going to talk about teamwork. And then she did the weirdest face to me. She was like, what? Like, really? You're going into your 3rd WBC with like nothing? And and then I remember we went through a lot of discussions, and I think it was a lot more emotional than technical. Like